Getting your blueberry soil right can be a bit tricky, so I'm going to share with you today how I finally got my blueberry plants to grow. When I first got these guys, they came in pots. I left them in pots for the first year. They fruited beautifully. I had a ton of fruit on first year plants. It was awesome. So I decided to put them in the ground. And when I put them in the ground, the only thing I did was add some pine mulch and some compost and dug a hole, put them in the ground, and covered them up, and they slowly over the next year had a terrible decline down to the point that these guys were almost dead. They had like one branch with a couple leaves at the top. They looked awful. So I researched what I could be doing wrong, and I realized that blueberries really like the pH to be acidic for their soils, somewhere in the 5 to 5.5 range. When I tested my soil, mine was almost at 7, so I knew that they were not happy in that soil. So I got some soil acidifier, added that to the top, waited 2 months, checked again, I was still in the high 7s. I did this for over a year. Retesting the soil, adding the soil acidifier, still same results. It did go down a tiny bit, but it just wasn't making any progress, and the plants were looking like they were so close to death that I had to do something extreme. I had to pull them up out of the ground and put them in pots so that I control the soil a little bit easier. So I pulled them up using a shovel, digging as far beneath it, but when I pulled them up, I did disturb a lot of the root system. I shook off most of the soil on the root ball so that it was almost just the root exposed of the plant. I mixed in some compost, some plain peat moss, pine shavings, soil acidifier, mixed that all together and planted these blueberries in these pots. I put them in shade for about 2 months, and they started to recover from the issues. I tested the soil about 60 days after that, and I had gotten it all the way down to about 6.5. Every 2 months after that, I would check the soil, test the soil, add the soil acidifier, and in between, I would be adding the used coffee grinds that my husband and I use on a weekly basis. We're not huge coffee drinkers, so we probably have maybe 2 or 3 cups a week, but we would use those coffee grinds from those 2 or 3 cups and put them in top of the pot as like a mulch. This last season, when they were just about to start to bud, I added some berry tone. I'm going to tell you in a second some things that I would suggest doing differently, and berry tone is one of those things I would suggest doing differently. But I did add some berry tone. It started to bud and leaf out, but I noticed that the branches, like this one in particular, was very like tall and lanky, and mainly the buds and the flowers kind of happen at the edges of these shoots, like this one right here. They kind of happen right at the tip. Since I only had this one stem coming up out, I really only had like 1 or 2 bursts of flowers. So I realized at that point I wasn't pruning them correctly either. So I did some research on pruning, and so I started to cut them back. I cut this one back down to about here, I think it was, and I started cutting these back, and I ended up taking off most of the buds of all the flowers when I was doing my pruning, because I wanted to prune it now rather than wait a whole nother year for winter and prune it and then have a slower growth. So I sacrificed a lot of the buds. That's why I don't have a lot of blueberries. I have some. I have this little guy, I have one over here, I have a little bunch right there. So I do have some, but it would have had a lot more had I not pruned them. But the benefit here, by pruning them and by keep monitoring the soil pH, I have all of this new growth that I have not had in over 2 years. And the new growth next year will be the clusters of flowers. And so I should get a lot more next year. Now going forward, what I would suggest is in winter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these out of the pots. I'm going to get them bigger pots. I'm going to go up one more level. Don't start huge, you know, kind of go up in stages, but I'm going to go up another level on this one. Probably 5 to 7 gallons. Right now I think that they're at like a 4 to 5 gallon size. I'm going to probably go to a 5 to 7 gallon size. I am going to shake off all of the soil. I'm going to replace it with fresh peat moss, pine shavings, and I like to use these medium flake pine shavings, but if you have a pine tree near your house, definitely take the pine needles or pine leaves, pretty much anything pine, and really mix it in 50-50. The other thing that I will do is I will get the soil acidifier into that soil as well. I will put the recommended amount, which here says for potted plants, 1 tablespoon for each 4 inches of pot diameter. And usually for me that ends up being about a half a cup, but since I'm moving up pots, I'm gonna have to resize that again. After I've potted it up, I won't use compost at all, to be honest with you. I noticed that blueberries don't really like to be fed a lot, so I'll probably take out the compost, stick with just the peat moss, the pine shavings, and the soil acidifier. Then what I'll do is, while it's still dormant, I'll do some trimming of it, focusing on the branches that are older, because what I want to do is I want to create more branching off of these main leaders, and the best way to do that is to trim them off so that they create more branches that come off, and that will hopefully make these much more bushier than what they are now. Once I see the buds breaking, or the buds and the leaves starting to form and we're coming into spring, I'll keep adding my soil acidifier every 60 days, testing my soil at each one of those 60-day marks. And instead of using berry tone like I used this year, I'm going to add something like holly tone or azalea tone. Both of these are meant for acid-loving plants, so they have some components in there that will help add to the acid. I will only feed these at springtime, right before they start to bud. And then hopefully next year I should be able to show you an even more productive plant. But as you can see from the videos from before to now, they have definitely gotten a lot better. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope this helps you with your berries.